While bandits were massacring over 200 people in Plateau and Benue states last month, President Bola Tinubu was in London. Not for an emergency summit, not for a security briefing, for a state visit, shaking hands, taking photos, doing the diplomatic rounds. And here's what nobody is actually asking. If a sitting president cannot secure his own citizens at home, what exactly is he selling abroad? Because here's the thing, the UK visit wasn't unplanned. It was scheduled, it was deliberate, and his handlers knew the security situation on the ground before the plane took off. So the real question isn't whether Tinubu should have gone to London. The real question is, does this president actually have a plan for Nigeria's security, or is he just managing the optics of a crisis he cannot solve? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to see exactly why this matters and who benefits from you not asking that question. Before we go deeper, if you are just finding Niger Newsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise, without the spin. Hit subscribe and stay with me because this one gets interesting. Let me set the scene for you. In the first weeks of 2025, communities in Plateau State, particularly in Bokos and Mangu local government areas, were hit with coordinated attacks. The kind of attacks where people wake up and their village is on fire. Farmers, women, children. Over 200 confirmed dead in some counts, though local sources put the number higher. At roughly the same time, Benue State, which has been a recurring conflict zone for years, recorded fresh killings tied to the long-standing herder-farmer crisis. This is not a new problem, but the scale and the frequency are accelerating. Now, right in the middle of this unfolding humanitarian disaster, President Tinubu traveled to the United Kingdom for a state visit, met with King Charles, spoke at Chatham House, did the usual diplomatic circuit. Back home, Nigerians were burying their dead. The trigger for the public backlash wasn't just the timing, it was the response, or rather, the lack of one. No emergency security meeting convened before he left, no visible federal deployment to the affected communities, no presidential address that matched the gravity of what was happening on the ground. People started asking, at what point does a president's absence become an abdication? That's where this story begins. But as always with Nigerian politics, the surface is never the whole story. Now, before we get into who's really pulling strings here, let me show you how the institutions that are supposed to handle this are actually structured, because the gap between what should happen and what does happen tells you everything. Let's talk about how security is supposed to work in Nigeria, because this matters. Under the Nigerian Constitution, specifically Section 217, the armed forces exist to defend Nigeria's territorial integrity and suppress insurrection. The president is the commander-in-chief, full stop. That responsibility does not transfer when he boards a plane. The National Security Council, which the president chairs, is the apex body for coordinating Nigeria's security architecture. The NSC brings... Here's where I need you to think beyond the outrage, because outrage is easy. Strategy is what matters. Who benefits from Tinubu being seen as disengaged on security? The opposition, particularly the Labour Party and elements within the PDP, benefit enormously from every image of a burning village next to a photo of Tinubu smiling in London. That contrast is political gold. Peter Obi's team, Atiku's network, they are cataloguing every one of these moments for 2027. But here's the deeper layer. Some of the pressure on Tinubu isn't coming from the opposition, it's coming from within the APC itself.
There are governors, particularly in the north, who are deeply uncomfortable with how the security situation is being handled. Because insecurity isn't just a humanitarian issue, it's an economic issue, it's a political issue. Farmers who can't farm means food prices that keep rising. Food prices that keep rising means a restive population. A restive population is a political liability. And then there's the question of the silent players, the security contractors, the arms procurement networks, the middlemen who profit from prolonged insecurity. Every time Nigeria's security crisis drags on without resolution, someone is getting paid. That someone has an interest in the status quo. Now, the UK visit itself, was it purely ceremonial? Not entirely. There are conversations happening around investment, around diaspora remittances, around trade relationships post-Brexit. Tinubu's team will argue that securing foreign investment is also part of the security equation. Build the economy, reduce poverty, reduce recruitment into criminal networks. That argument isn't crazy, but it doesn't hold water when communities are being wiped out and the federal response looks like business as usual. The electoral math. In 2027, the Middle Belt, Plateau, Benue, Nasarawa will be a battleground. Tinubu barely held it in 2023. If he cannot demonstrate visible, effective response to the killings in these states, he risks hemorrhaging support in a region that could decide the election. That's not just optics, that's arithmetic. Let's zoom out and talk about what this means for Nigeria as a whole, because this isn't just about one man's travel schedule. The federalism question. Nigeria operates a federal system where security is technically a federal responsibility, but the practical reality is that state governors are on the front lines without the tools to respond. The state police debate has been going on for years. The constitution has been amended on the conversation, but implementation is slow and contested. Until that is resolved, you will keep seeing this pattern. Federal government slow to respond, state governments overwhelmed, communities left to fend for themselves. The economic consequences. The Middle Belt is Nigeria's food basket. Plateau, Benue, Taraba, Nasarawa, these states produce a significant portion of the country's yams, rice, tomatoes, and livestock. Every time there's a major attack cycle in these areas, supply chains break down. Prices spike in Lagos, Abuja, Kano. The man buying tomatoes in Mushin is connected to the security crisis in Bokkos, whether he knows it or not. The ethnic and religious dimension. I'll say this carefully because this is where people get it wrong. These conflicts are frequently framed as Christian farmers versus Muslim herders, and while there is a religious coloring to some of the rhetoric, the root drivers are land, climate, and cattle routes that colonial administrators drew and that modern governance has never properly resolved. Collapsing it into a religious war serves the people who want to prevent a solution. It's a narrative management tool. Be suspicious of anyone on any side who leads with the religious frame instead of the structural one. Security spiral. Here is the risk that nobody wants to say out loud. When communities repeatedly experience attacks with no visible federal response, they stop waiting for the state. They arm themselves, they form vigilante groups, and once you have parallel armed structures operating outside state control, you are one incident away from something much harder to contain. This section is relevant because the UK visit is literally the international angle. Let's be clear about what Chatham House is. It's not just a think tank, it's one of the most influential foreign policy institutions in the world. When a sitting African president speaks there, they are essentially making a pitch to investors, to policymakers, to the international community about their country's stability and governance credentials. Tinubu spoke about economic transformation, about the subsidy removal, about his administration's reform agenda, and those are legitimate conversations to have. But here's the optics problem on the international stage. Foreign investors and multilateral institutions do their own risk assessments. They have analysts watching exactly what's happening in the Middle Belt, in the Northwest, in the Northeast. A president's speech at Chatham House does not override a Kroll Associates or Control Risks Country report. So the question for the diaspora, many of whom are in the UK, is this. When Tinubu said Nigeria is open for business and moving in the right direction, how do you reconcile that with what you are reading about your family members back home? The UK relationship specifically, there are ongoing conversations about trade, about extradition treaties, about the status of Nigerian assets held in UK institutions. The visit had substance beyond the ceremonial, but substance and timing are two different things. You can have a necessary meeting and still have chosen the wrong moment to take it. One more thing. The international community's patience with Nigeria's security situation is not unlimited. The IMF, the World Bank, development partners, they are watching the trajectory. Sustained insecurity affects Nigeria's credit rating, its ability to raise capital, and its standing in negotiations. This is not abstract. It has direct consequences for every Nigerian. Let me steel man the other side, because intellectual honesty matters. Argument 1. A president can govern from anywhere. This is technically true. Tinubu had his security apparatus with him. He was in communication with the NSA and the service chiefs. Modern governance doesn't require physical presence for every decision. Where it falls apart, governance is not just logistics, it's signal. When citizens are being massacred, the president's physical presence in the country sends a message that cannot be replicated by a phone call. Leadership in crisis is partly symbolic. Symbol is substance when a population needs to know their government sees them. Argument 2. The opposition is just playing politics. They wouldn't have done better. Honestly, this might be partially true. The PDP oversaw 16 years during which Nigeria's security situation deteriorated significantly. Boko Haram metastasized under Jonathan. The Buhari years gave us the bandits in the northwest. Tinubu inherited a mess. Nobody disputes that. Where it falls apart, inheriting a mess does not absolve you of the responsibility to respond to that mess. The question is not who created the problem, the question is what you are doing about it now. Pointing at your predecessors while communities are burning is not a security strategy. Argument 3. The UK visit was about securing investment that will ultimately help security. I addressed this earlier, but let me be direct. This is the weakest argument. Investment takes years to materialize into jobs and poverty reduction. The people being killed in Plateau State needed a response this week, not a 5-year economic plan. The misconception I want to demolish completely, the idea that criticizing the president's travel schedule is anti-Tinubu tribalism or ethnic bias. Accountability is not tribalism. Asking your president to prioritize a security emergency over a diplomatic photo-op is not partisan. It's the basic expectation of democratic citizens.
Let me tell you what to watch for, because this story is not over. Most likely next moves. The Tinubu administration will respond to this criticism in a very predictable way. Watch for a high-profile security meeting, probably convened within the next few weeks, with TV cameras, service chiefs seated around a table, and language about decisive action. This is the standard playbook. Absorb the criticism, produce a visible response, wait for the news cycle to move on. Watch also for targeted military operations announced in the affected zones, airstrikes or ground operations in Plateau or Benue, the kind of operations that look good in a press release but historically have not translated into lasting stability. Signals that things are escalating. If you see governors from the Middle Belt making joint public statements against the federal government's handling of the crisis, that is a red flag. It means the political coalition holding the country together is cracking. If the death toll continues to climb through the second quarter of this year with no visible federal deployment, watch the Labour Party begin to frame 2027 as a referendum on presidential competence, not just policy differences. That shifts the election from issues to personality, and that's a different kind of campaign. Best case scenario. Tinubu returns from the UK, convenes a genuine emergency security session,
deploys resources to the Middle Belt, and, critically, initiates the state policing framework that gives governors actual tools to respond. If he does all of that within 60 days, the narrative shifts. Worst-case scenario: business as usual. Condolences issued, committees set up, reports commissioned, nothing changes on the ground. Communities arm themselves, the violence spreads. By 2026, you have a security situation that makes the 2023 baseline look manageable. Long-term political impact. If Tinubu cannot demonstrate visible improvement in Nigeria's security situation by mid-2026, 18 months out from the election, his re-election bid becomes an uphill battle, regardless of economic reform gains. Security is existential to Nigerian voters in a way that subsidy removal simply isn't. I opened this video with a question. Does this president actually have a plan for Nigeria's security, or is he just managing the optics of a crisis he cannot solve? Here is my honest, measured answer. The evidence so far points to optics